So,
Yeah.
okay, guys, gender neutral guy, they, whatever. I'm writing a new book. Can we talk about, like, I decided that I was going to write I told myself that I wasn't going to write another book.
That
And,
jinxed it.
well, you know what it was? I told myself I wasn't going to write another book because the last couple books that I wrote, I think I wrote for the wrong reasons. I wrote because I felt like I should write a book. Like I wrote because strategically I thought that it was a good reason to write those books. And they were written largely by a ghostwriter, and the ghostwriter was unbelievable. Mike Zimmerman is his name. And the whole Wealthy Fit Pros Guide series were written by a ghostwriter. Like it was my work, but it was written by a ghostwriter. And I don't feel as much of connection to those as the books, of course, that I've written myself from the start, which is not to say that you should use a ghostwriter. I think that that's fine to do, and I don't think there's anything wrong with it. But I wrote those books because strategically I thought that it was the right move for me to do. And I still think it probably was. You know, if you ever want to get into a business where you write books to make money, a back catalog of books, like you basically have one book on the front end that you become known for. Mine is Ignite the Fire, and then you build a back catalog of books that continue to sell off of the front one. And if you self-publish, it can be quite profitable. But I told myself I wasn't going to write another book until I had an idea that I really thought was good enough, until I figured, like, until I basically couldn't not write a book. And so it's been a number of years. When did the last Wealthy Fit Pros Guide come out, Amber? Like
you were working on it when we were in Mexico, so pre-COVID. So I remember meeting Mike, and that was actually, I think, when, like, the very first time I went to Mexico with you guys, so like 4 years ago.
You did two of the retreats, I think, only.
I did.
You did Mexico and you did Costa Rica. You were in Costa Rica, right?
No, I never went to Costa Rica.
You didn't go to Costa Rica?
That was further back. I think that was the year before. The first time I went with Jory and Nate, and then the second time it was just me.
Right.
So I think it was the very first time I went.
Yeah, we did company retreats for a number of years. We did Hawaii the first year, Costa Rica COVID. The second, and then Mexico both years. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I invited you to come to Mexico a month or two ago and you couldn't make it. So
no.
Whatever. That's on you, dude. Anyway, the idea behind this book, I want to talk to you about it, and I want to continue talking about it with you both on the podcast for a few reasons. One is I like to build in public. It's just something I like to do. I find that it's good marketing. It also helps me kind of battle test ideas. But the second is that I'd like for you two really to be kind of my sounding board for this, because it's a book about coaching. And it's a book about building a coaching business. Now, not necessarily a fitness coaching business. It's actually going to be coaching in general, which is a bit of a divergence for me. But I think that what I have to say here is enough for a broader audience. Like, I don't need to tell you how to build a fitness program. Like, that's not, you don't need to buy a book for that. You don't need somebody's specialized knowledge for that. But I feel like I've done enough in the coaching world myself, and also with people that I've worked with, to understand some truths about what you actually do to build a coaching business and what you don't, that I think are really globally applicable and also non-obvious. And that's what I was looking for with a book like this. Is like, what is true? And when people hear it, they're going to know that it's true, and they're going to nod their heads, but it's also going to help them see things in a much simpler, much more obvious light. And so the concept behind this is there's coaching, I call it classic coaching. There's classic coaching, and then there's being an influencer. And neither one is better or worse. But a lot of coaches are playing influencers, and a lot of influencers are playing coach. And it comes down to a question that I've asked before, which is, how do you beat Michael Jordan? And the answer to that question is, you sure as hell don't play basketball. And so the idea behind this classic coaching is that actually a lot of the things that I feel like are overwhelming people who are in coaching businesses right now, they really don't need to be doing. You don't actually need to be creating content. Maybe you do, but probably not. And it's probably a very inefficient way to achieve your desired outcome. which is to get enough coaching clients to build a coaching business. And there's a lot of non-obvious truths like that, where there are much straighter paths to success than what a lot of people are taking. And as a result, they're doing way too much work for way too little benefit. And it's causing a tremendous amount of anxiety. Like, even if you stumble upon doing the right thing, even if you stumble upon the right type of content, well, you probably don't actually know that it's the right type of content that you should be building, if it is even content that you should be building in the first place. And as a result, then you still have anxiety, and you still can't sleep well at night, and you still can't be present with your family, and you're still not going to do it for long enough to be able to get any rewards from it, because you aren't quite sure yet that it's what you should be doing, even if you stumble upon the right thing to do. And so number one is, okay, what's the actual problem you're trying to solve? Well, I got to get a few clients. We talk about Bolton Foods. Like, I got to get a few clients. I got to sell this expensive meat. Well, I'm going to go to where those people are, and I'm going to build actual connections with them. And I talk about how to do that in a whole bunch of different ways. And very rarely, almost never, in fact, never in this book, is it creating content the way that people conventionally do. But then I also get into a whole bunch of fallacies in it, where, everybody thinks that once they've gotten some success, they think that they should scale their coaching business by building a membership site or building ebooks and stuff like that. And my answer is, the biggest benefit of a coaching business is that it kicks off a ton of cash. If you do it right, it is just about the most profitable business you can run. I do think you should trade your time for money, but I think you should make sure that your time is valuable and communicate that value. And then the way to grow is not necessarily to get away from trading time for money. It's actually to use technology and to potentially hire other coaches and stuff like that to amplify you, because the margins are so damn good. The solution, like a lot of people talk about how to productize coaching businesses. How can I build this as a product so I can potentially pick it up and sell it? You don't build a coaching business so that you can sell it for a whole amount of money. You build a coaching business so that it can kick off a ton of cash, which will allow you to do other things potentially, or just so that it'll kick off a ton of cash. Building it in the hopes that it will sell is actually the wrong idea. And then once you become successful in a coaching business, the way to continue to grow your career is not then to scale by putting a low end option or whatever it is. It's like, yo, you figured out the formula. Like, either amplify that or decide that you're good with it. And both of those are really, really good. Or you, and then so the way that the book is structured right now, let me take you through the structure actually. So the way that I have it kind of mapped out is more profits, better client results, and improved quality of life. And I mean, I don't know if that'll be what it's actually going to be called, or it's going to be written anywhere, but that's the kind of idea. And so the intro is the classic coach. And so there's basically three themes there, which is coach versus influencer, money, like how does money actually work, why you should focus on profit, not necessarily like as much revenue, but focus on profit, and then scale later, maybe. And then problem solving, like can you work backwards from the problem to actually figure out what you need to do, because that will enable you also to have a much better quality of life. Quality of life is shit if you feel like you should be doing content but don't quite know why, and then you never do enough and you're never quite confident of it, and you're always worried about it, and then you always look at your follower count or the content success of that day in terms of engagement, superficial engagement, and you're like, I'm a failure today, not as many people liked my post. Well, if you actually work backwards from the problem and know what you're trying to do, what that allows you to do is have a much better quality of life away from that. You're not going to feel like you have to do as much, because you probably have to do way less than you think if you're taking the right moves. Like if you're working 40 hours a week and you feel like there's not enough hours in the day, the solution is not some hack to like better manage your time. The solution is to stop doing dumb shit with your time. And so that's section 1. Section 2 is selling. Section 3 is serving, and section 4 is scaling. And so I talk about the different pieces of each of those, and a lot of them are on that same type of theme that I've kind of been talking about. And then the final appendendum section, like the onward section, is like my story, which is the story of the coach who then went on to do like non-coaching things, but still actually, I own 2 coaching businesses and I've never coached a day in either of them. And so I was a coach in a personal training studio. And then I kept coaching and used that money to funnel book writing. And then I did a whole bunch of seminars and stuff like that, basically figured out what was, what was good, what wasn't good. Then I built like high-end online programs, sold them to a few people, but at a high margin, and used that to then build a whole bunch of free materials, which created much bigger audiences, which then allowed me to build more coaching programs, which then fed off way more money, which now has allowed me to build software, Quick Coach. And Quick Coach software, the way that it's structured is actually siloed completely from the company. The P&L, the audience, everything is actually kept completely separate. Because I look at Quick Coach and I say, okay, software as a service is a potentially sellable asset. In the future, I might decide to sell it. Coaching isn't, but I can use the coaching, which kicks off all the cash, to fund the potentially sellable asset. And so it's my progress along that journey, and how, basically to illustrate all of the points I'm saying. Anyway, that's what I'm thinking right now. Thoughts?
I can just say that the immediately when you said servicing, excuse me, so much trouble happens in the service portion of business,
Right.
and fixing that solves so many other problems that I see coaches having as I'm talking to coaches on a daily basis. I just don't think, I think industry wide, and I don't have the breadth of experience in this industry that Jonathan has. Let me just say that first of all, nor do I have the thickness of beard. But
Really thick.
It's a thing. It's frothy. It's it looks like it tastes like maybe a chocolate or a cocoa bean or something like that. I don't know. It's just frothy. It's like a Coca-Cola float, but without the vanilla ice cream. In any case, I don't have the breadth or depth of Jonathan's beard or knowledge. But what I've observed is there's so much potential in this space, probably all of coaching. I'll speak specifically to fitness. There's so much potential to improve the service that we're giving to clients. Like,
Let me throw something at you. And
Throw
tell
it
me
at
whether
me,
you
Jonathan.
agree. Tell me whether you agree.
Throw it.
My philosophy is that the coaching actually starts during the selling process.
100%.
And a great selling process does a few things. It gets the client really bought into the coaching from day one. Doesn't trick the client. It just gets them bought into the idea of why now? Why is this so important to me? The second, though, this is the part that I want to throw at both of you and see what you think, is that a great selling process identifies for the coach what the real problem is, what the real transformation is that the client wants to undertake, so that they can actually get to work on the real problem.
Mm-hmm.
A bad selling process, the coach then probably isn't actually solving the real problem. The client has hired them to solve a problem, and the coach doesn't yet know what that is because they haven't gone deep enough and then even if they get the client quote unquote results in terms of weight loss or whatever it is, well, that's not actually what the client wanted a lot of the time. It's what those results mean is what the client wanted. And so that's where I like I'm not going to get into like, here's how you build like the best workout, because I don't think that matters as much.
Mm-mm.
I think what matters much more is that you get in super deep during the selling, during the marketing process, and understand what problem you're actually being hired to help a client with. What do you think about that?
I will see that and raise it before I defer to Amber, because not only do I think that the coach doesn't often know what the client wants, I think the client oftentimes does not know what they want.
I agree.
I have, through reflective listening, pick up your motivational interviewing books out there, guys and gals, if you're listening. But I have been told on the last 2 enrollment calls that I've had, one thing I've been told was, you're a really good listener. I'm so amazed by how well you listen to what I said. And I've been told subsequently, when I hear back what I said, I've realized that that's not exactly what I want to accomplish. And I've never really heard it out loud said back to me. And oh my gosh, it's so much different for me now hearing what you said, I've said, that I understand that there's some other things that I want to get accomplished. And I defer to Amber.
This is when let me just clarify that. This is when you paraphrase back to the client.
Yeah, absolutely.
What they said to you. I understand.
Absolutely.
So when you paraphrase back to the client and summarize to them, they say, oh my God, I've never actually understood as well as I understand now what is actually bothering me.
100%.
That's powerful. That's powerful.
100%.
Yeah, thanks for that.
Amber, your delts?
Miss Reynolds.
Thoughts?
Miss Reynolds.
I hate that. You say it that way. Like, gives me the heebie-jeebies. It's funny because I think with sales calls in particular, there are kind of 2 problems, right? Like Ren mentioned, like most people don't know how to communicate effectively, like just as a general rule of thumb, right? And so, like you said, part of our job is to figure out, what it is that they actually want. But also, I think a lot of coaches go into a call with the intent to sell. But that's not your job. Your job isn't to sell. Your job is to help. And so I think between both of those issues, that's where a lot of kind of coaching and sales falls through, is that.
I love it. So Jonathan, you said the servicing starts on the call, like the coaching starts right away.
Well, I think during the marketing, not necessarily on the call. Often it's on the call, but you might not sell to them through calls. But I think that it starts during the marketing, right? Like if you're doing higher end coaching where there is a sales call or consultation process, which there often is, and it probably should be. No, not to say you shouldn't charge for an initial consultation, but either way, you're having an initial call with them, then yeah, it's a series of empathetic listening, motivational interviewing, paraphrasing back to them. Hey, what I'm hearing is this, like, call me out on it. But even if you don't, I think it comes down to the marketing as well, like not necessarily on the call. In your marketing, are you actually calling out the real problems you solve well enough? Because the problem is not 5 pounds of weight loss.
Right.
The problem is what that person feels like they'll become as a result of that 5 pounds of weight loss, which often actually happens when that person gains weight, if they change their body composition, or if they finally figure out a way to get into an exercise routine. Because as we know from fitness, the weight on the scale is not representative oftentimes of your actual health, of your actual energy, even of your physique, of how you look, depending on what you want. Now, I mean, somebody really heavy, yes, obviously, they might need to lose sort of absolute weight, but for the most part, the general public isn't yet aware, despite all of our best efforts, that the weight on the scale really doesn't mean much for most people. And a healthy body composition might be a bit heavier body for men or women. A super, super lean, ripped, shredded body is often a much less healthy body than one that has like a little bit of fat on it. It's not a bad thing to have that. And also, of course, more muscle. Now, I mean, you could take that one quote in isolation from me and plaster it all over the internet and say, John says that being fat is healthy. And like, it's not what I'm saying necessarily. It's just that the super lean, unrealistic body type, I don't believe is how most people, anyway, it doesn't matter. Neither here nor there. But I mean, any kind of coaching, right? You're looking at like any type of life coaching, wellness coaching, what's the person actually hiring you to do? Oftentimes, I don't know. I mean, I'll throw this at you guys again, because I'm figuring this stuff out. Like, these are like the tiny details that I'm figuring out. And the more people I talk to about, the better. I found when I reflect back on my life, oftentimes what I was being hired was to help somebody finally figure out a way how to fit fitness and health and nutrition into their life. It wasn't to tell them what to do. It wasn't even to be there and count sets and reps or to send down from the heavens some perfect routine. It was just like, help me figure out a way to actually, I know that this is important for me to do. Help me figure out a way to build this into my life in a way that I'm going to continue doing it.
And
go ahead, Amber.
We had a post in the students and grads group, I think yesterday or the day before yesterday, where this is kind of relevant, where like she has a client that wants to quit. And all of a sudden she's like, well, I don't feel like I'm getting what I thought I was getting or what I need, but it was never really communicated, right? Like what the coach is, she's delivering what she promised, but somewhere along the line, the client had a different expectation of why she hired her. So I think, yeah, that's definitely a big thing to figure out.
Yeah. Here's what I found in terms of coaching my population. I work pretty much exclusively with moms over 30. A lot of people from the outside in, and it's probably how it would be in terms of writing a book, Jonathan, because I don't know much about it. It's not something that's in my wheelhouse. I don't do it all the time.
I have no idea how you're actually supposed to do it either.
Right.
It's like, it's funny because I spoke to people 2 days ago. I went on a hike with a couple guys who like run like a big clothing business. And I was like, okay, so tell me how business actually works.
Right.
Like I have no idea. They're like, yeah, we had a yearly planning meeting with our staff here. It was great. I was like, okay, how does that actually work? Like indulge me. I want to play business. Right. And it's the same with books. I'm like, I don't know how, like, I don't know. I mean, I sit down and I rip it and I try to tell a story. Even in nonfiction, I try to tell a story through it. I try to have a central theme that you run throughout. And then you basically look at it like a tree. The central theme is the main trunk of the tree. And then you have all the branches coming off of it, but you can't have a separate tree. That's a separate book. And it needs to all branch off. That's all that I know about it.
So the point I was trying to make is like, there are people who are good at seeing the in-between spaces, right? Operating in the gray. And I think those are the people that don't need us. What I find is the people that are only able to see the black and the white of something. Those are the people that have problems because when they don't have all the time in the world, they don't do anything. And on the opposite end of that, when they feel like they have no time in the world, they don't do anything, right? So I think good coaching, it helps you to see the gray area, the in-between area. And when clients hire me, I know what's most often happening is they are learning in a safe environment how to find the in-between spaces so that this fits into the context of their life, because they only ever think about it in terms of I work out every day. And if I can't work out every day, I work out 0 days, or I eat perfectly. And if I can't eat perfectly, I eat what I want. Like they just don't have a good perception.
It's binging either way. It's addictive either way.
Tetris. It's life Tetris. They don't know how to change those blocks around so that they fit into the shape that's already been provided. And I think that's where good coaching happens. And I think that's what most people are wanting a coach to do is that. And if they figure that out, then they figure subsequently I can lose 10 pounds. But if you just go after the 10 pounds and you don't coach people to figure that out, I think that's when they feel like I'm not getting what I paid for. Even though the methodology is there, they're not feeling it fitting into their life. They don't feel any more empowered by the information that they did. And I think that's a big misstep in the servicing when you're coaching people. That's what I think.
Good. I wrote that down and it's going to be in my book and I'll try to remember to give you credit.
I'm also going online to tell everybody that you said being fat is good. So
I have your firefighter story in there too.
Oh, very good. I love that.
Yeah, I had that one already. I like that. I like the idea of the life Tetris because it creates a visual. Like I'm trying to figure out as many narratives, as many visuals, as many stories that are sticky to really to really make these points come home. And I think that that's a good one. It's like one block of that might be the 5 pounds of weight loss or whatever
Right.
it is, but that's one block of the Tetris board. And somebody's actually hiring you to help fit the pieces together. They're not hiring you to like pick out one block and say, hey, here's the only thing that you look at, because that's actually really easy to do. If that's all that they needed, it wouldn't be very hard to find that.
Yeah, they got meth for that. Drop 5 pounds quick. It's
Meth?
really, yeah, crystal meth. It's one of the things born in the South, John. You'll love it. Give it a shot. I think you're a little bit too far south to get your own birds, but drive about, I don't know, 150, maybe 200 miles north. You'll find some meth somewhere later on, somewhere in Texas. We got plenty in the Carolinas. But I digress.
I'm pretty sure I could find meth here in Mexico if I really wanted
sure.
to.
I'm sure.
It would not
Be a lot cheaper too.
Yeah, I'm confident that you can. Oh my
I do
gosh.
not think this town, it's so interesting where I live here. It's called Sayulita, and this town just transforms at night. I've only been out at night like twice because, you know, I have kids and we don't see nighttime when you have kids. And it's just a different world. It's crazy how much it transforms. It's like, yeah, I don't really like it at night so much. But then you wake up in the morning and you see people walking around. It's like, yo, you haven't been to bed yet, have you?
Oh, there used to be a song in the 80s, a hip hop song that said the freaks come out at night, Jonathan.
Yeah.
It was one of my sister's parents. I don't know.
So tell me more about serving. Talk to me more about serving clients. Let me dig in more to what I have here. You know, I'm gonna definitely talk about clients ghosting, about what to do when refund requests come in. And of course, oftentimes a refund is just a need or a hope that's gone unmet. Like it's a missed expectation, or it's a miscommunicated expectation. And if a refund request comes in, it's almost too late. But I'm going to talk about that. But what I really want to dial in on are the general themes of what really matters when you're talking about serving clients, away from like what you're actually serving them with, if that makes sense. Because if I'm honest, I think that's the easy part. It really, the level of information that most clients need of any coaching service is so low.
I got to jump in with you. I got to jump in as you're putting those thoughts together. I see it running in your head because, you know, when you coach coaches pretty much all day, here's something I run into a lot. Can I send you an example of my programming so you can tell me whether you think it's good or not? Amber's just rolling it like Amber just died in her mind from that one. Like,
people ask you that.
Yeah, they ask. Yeah, they'll ask you that.
Is my programming good enough? Is what they're asking.
In the mentorship protocol. And hey, trust me, I get it. I'm not trying to disparage people asking that question, but I'm just latching on to the point that Jonathan was making about people overestimating the nuts and bolts part of servicing, because that's never where you're going to shine. My opinion is your servicing is not going to shine in the nuts and bolts of it. I'm not going to go to my local Jiffy Lube that changes oil here in North Carolina, and they change the oil, and I say, damn it, you bastards have changed this oil to the height of oil changing possibilities. I can't believe how phenomenally you drain that oil and put new oil in it. I'm buying a franchise. Like, that's, you know, that's not going to, that's the easy part of servicing.
So let me read you this. Let me read you this.
Read it, Jonathan.
So one of the things I do whenever we spoke about how I read often. I mean, a lot of the time when I'm reading, I'm just reading for interest's sake and reading for fun.
You're a skimmer.
Do a lot of reading for fiction and stuff like that. But whenever I have an idea for a book, basically I map out everything that I think should be there. And then this metaphor of a tree, you know, I have the core theme is the trunk, and then I have all the branches off of it. And then I just pull away the branches, because what I find is that it's like, oh, that's a good idea for another book, right? And a lot of books fall flat because they try to do too much. Like, this is not a book about how to be a good coach. This is a book about the theme of classic coaching, the theme of here's what really matters that people are missing right now with coaching. And so when I have that, I have these branches. I'm like, okay, well, I feel like I've got a good story there. I feel like I've got a good analogy there. Okay, I'm missing an analogy there. So I'll go and look for other resources that cover these things too. And I'll be kind of like a sleuth. I'll look for analogies. So this is when I came, and I don't actually have a reference because I'm not going to use this as is. It's just like part of my research. But let me read this to you. It's not what you know. Successful lawyers have not memorized more case studies than unsuccessful lawyers have. They didn't necessarily get better grades in law school. Did you ever wonder why some doctors seem to do very well while others merely make a living? Successful doctors don't necessarily know more medicine than other doctors do. Indeed, most people probably don't know enough about medicine to begin to evaluate doctors on the basis of their medical schools. How likely are you to check into what your doctor's class ranking was back at medical school? I know that I've never done so. And I also know that my confidence in my medical advisor has nothing to do with how well he did as a medical student.
I love it.
Because it's true. People are so worried about like where they go to school, where they go to university, and then they get into the real world and nobody gives a shit. You could have like I have friends who, I mean, I grew up in a middle to upper class Jewish community. So surprise, surprise, I have friends who are doctors. So I have friends who are doctors who went to some of the best medical schools in Canada and the United States. I also have friends who are doctors who could not get into any of those medical schools. And so what they did is they went to one of these Caribbean schools where if you can pay, you go to the Caribbean school. They have a relationship with the Canadian Medical Board. You write your board exams in Canada after this Caribbean medical school. The reason that they didn't go to the Canadian medical schools was not because they wanted to go to the Caribbean. It's because they literally weren't smart enough to get into the Canadian medical schools. Well, I don't think that they're any worse of a doctor. In fact, I might argue that they might be better of a doctor, because I don't necessarily need a doctor who is, I mean, these friends of mine that went to the high-end like schools in Canada and the United States, they were always going to be a doctor. Everything they ever did, every volunteer, every association, everything they did in school was always like, from when they were 10, was like, I'm going to be a doctor. Well, they're not particularly well-rounded as humans as a result of that.
Right.
But the other part of it is they worked hard, don't get me wrong, but they didn't have to be as resourceful. They didn't have to work as hard. They didn't have to be, they weren't as well-rounded as the folks who went to these accessory schools. And when I'm looking for a doctor, I don't know. I mean, am I looking for like the smartest doctor in the world? I mean, how would I even know? I don't think that I am. I think that I'm looking for a doctor who gives a shit the most.
Right.
I think that I'm looking for a doctor who is the most resourceful. And it would absolutely, maybe not with a doctor. You know, I'm thinking back to the most extreme case in her life when Allison got diagnosed with cancer. And I'm not thinking like what I would do in abstract. I'm like, what did we actually do? Mm-hmm. Well, we did call up a couple of our friends who were in the medical community in Canada, and we told them what happened, and we asked them if they had any referrals to top end, oh God, what's it called? Basically ear, nose, and throat cancer specialists. Mm-hmm. I forgot what the title is for it. And they made a referral to one Dr. Aneptikidis, I think it was his name. And he was, you know, so we did try to find quote unquote the best, but we also didn't check. I have no idea where he went to school.
Right.
I have no idea why he's the best. I have no idea if he's the best. I have no idea if he's ever published any papers. I have no idea what his success rate is or isn't. All that I know is that people who I trust because I know them, not because I have reason to trust them or their referral quality, by the way.
Right.
But people that I trust because I know them put me in touch with this person and vouched for them. And that's the most extreme case. My wife literally had cancer and we were looking for a doctor to treat her cancer.
Right.
And that's how I went about it. I didn't check this doctor's credentials. I didn't check this doctor's success rate. That's how people choose things. They choose things. That's a damn good story to tell in that book, by the way.
That's
Fuck yes.
that
This is what I wanted to get out of this podcast.
I was just thinking, man, how can you not connect that to know, like, and trust? You have proved out your phrase of know, like, and trust through the most dire of like, what's more, other than your children, God forbid. I mean, what's more dire than your wife having an illness and you solving that problem sort of intuitively through a know, like, and trust network of people that you that you have not checked deeply into the validity of their referral, nor the validity of the person that they referred, yet no,
or their
like,
credentials,
or their credentials,
or their success rate.
Nobody cares that I'm peeing.
And yet every coach is sitting there thinking that their credentials and their success 100%. Rate means a damn thing and not actually building the trust amongst a network to be able to get that referral. I think about my financial advisor. How did we choose our financial advisor? Shit, these stories are great. How did we choose our financial advisor? And Amber, can you send me this recording when we're done and kind of timestamp this part of it so I can pull these out? How did we choose our financial advisor? Well, we're at the point now where we have many millions of dollars invested with this person, which means that it makes a lot of sense to have a good financial advisor.
Right.
Because we pay this person 1% a year, just under 1% a year, which means we're paying them tens of thousands of dollars a month or a year to manage our money. And by the way, if you know how financial advisors work, you pay them that money whether they make you money or not, which is why I kind of want to be a financial advisor. Right. But how did we choose our financial advisor? Well, Ted Rushsteffen is a partner at the firm that he is at. It's called Tri-Delta. They're in Toronto. And Ted writes a column for the Financial Post, which is part of the Globe and Mail newspaper, which means that he has that's like the one thing he does, right? Which is the logic that justifies a decision. Oh, this guy is the guy who writes the column, which means I could trust him. So that's not why anybody would choose him first, but that might mean if they were deciding between him and somebody else, they might choose that. He can also use those columns and send them to his clients, which he does to me, and I never read them because I don't give a shit. But how did he get us at a customer? Well, he sits on the board of the synagogue. Work backwards. If you're Bolton Foods and you got expensive meat to sell, you show up in a neighborhood where there's rich people and you go and talk to people and you try to sell your expensive meat. Well, if you're a financial advisor and you want to manage people's money, you go to a synagogue where there's Jewish people. Jewish people often have money. And you sit on the board of that synagogue.
Right.
And you never have to look for another customer again. Because my dad was also on the board of the synagogue years back. My dad started investing his money with this person, not because he thought that he was the best or not the best, because how else do you make a decision? Well, you trust the person. He's on the board of the synagogue. So will you. You have that in common with them. You choose them. When I started to make some money, well, who the hell was I going to go to? I was going to go to who my dad goes to. And now he's done well for us. And he's great at relationship building. And he's great at communicating and keeping up with us. And he has been a very good coach, financial coach, in addition to investment advisor. So yeah, he does a good job. But the reason that he got our business, I have no idea whether he has credentials or doesn't have credentials. And he doesn't actually do the investing work. Because if you know how financial advisors work, there's basically the financial advisor is effectively the salesperson. They schmooze. They're the coach. They're the front face with the client. And then there's quants in the back who don't really talk to anybody. because they're so mathematical minded that they probably shouldn't speak to humans.
Right.
And they're the ones doing all the math, doing all the deep analysis, and they don't have to deal with customers. You can't do the two things.
Flesh-covered robots in the back.
Well, that's kind of how it is, though, right?
That's exactly how it is.
Think about, like, reflect on your life. Like, if you're listening to this, reflect on your life of, like, anybody who you choose for any of these types of roles. It might be a coach, or even if you don't hire coaches, you still have a doctor, you still have a dentist, you still have all these. And these are very important people to you. These are people who serve very important functions in your life. How did you choose them? Think about that deeply. Because that's how people are going to choose you or not choose you. And if people aren't choosing you, well, maybe it's because you're demonstrating a squat really poorly to your 250 Instagram followers every single day.
Right.
And you think that the problem is that you're not using the right fucking trending music, but that has nothing to do with it. The problem is that you're not actually building the real connections to have some sort of trust and connection with the type of people who are going to buy you. You're not going to where they are, i.e. the synagogue. You're not building relationships amongst other doctors, because an ear, nose, and throat cancer specialist will benefit a lot by having good relationships with other types of general practitioner doctors and that type of thing, so that they get the referral once that other person comes in. I have no idea what credentials my financial advisor has. Maybe he doesn't have any. I have no clue. And I gave this guy, and I don't even know, like, yeah, sure, he has an office, but like, I've given this man millions of dollars. Like, I gave one of these men, like my wife who had cancer, and I gave this other man millions of dollars.
Right.
And
right.
I never looked at any of their credentials in any way, shape, or form, or their history of success.
Please put that in the book. Write that verbatim. I need that to be in the book for
Think
word.
about that. Think about that for a
More
second.
important to a man than his wife and his money.
Think
the
about
two
this.
Probably most important things that a man thinks about in his life, and you didn't do any deep dive into whether these people were qualified.
Absolutely none.
May I tell you something?
They could have gone to the equivalent of the Caribbean University,
right,
wherever, and well, even me. Okay, let me use me as an example. I have an honors degree in kinesiology from the University of Western Ontario, which is kind of quote unquote known as like one of the Ivy League schools in Canada. Right. So I have a very good degree. And the reason that I got into that school, because I was never a particularly great student in high school, was for there were two moments that helped me get into it. Number one is the two classes in like grade 12 before university that are the hardest to get high marks in are basically calculus and English. My English, grade 12, I did in the summer before grade 12. I did an exchange program in England. It was part in London, part in Oxford. And when you complete it, you get a pass-fail, which meant that it didn't have anything to do with my average.
Right.
Calculus, I had a tutor at night, and I did not take calculus at my high school, which was a very competitive academic high school. I took calculus at a private program called City Academy after school, where it was pretty much impossible not to get an 85. And as a result, I was able to get an 84 average, which got me into effectively like the Ivy League, like kinesiology program in Canada. And then in university, yeah, sure, I have my degree in kinesiology. I had like a 62 average. Like, I didn't do well. Why do you think I'm not a doctor? Like, there was no chance. Like, I didn't do well. But it's even a good degree from a good school, even if you were to look at first of all, listener, if you've bought any of my books, if you've listened to anything I've done, if you've bought any of my programs, have you ever seen me train a client? Have you ever spoken to any of my past clients? Have you ever looked into what my education was? Have you ever spoken to anybody who and looked into any past success that I might have had? Maybe that last one, maybe. But even if you did, you would find that, oh, he has a degree in kinesiology, a 4-year honors degree in kinesiology from the University of Western Ontario. That's a damn good degree. That's about as good of a degree as you could have if you are in a kinesiology program in Canada. Well, it doesn't say on the degree that I got a 62%. Somebody else might have gotten a 90. They got the same damn piece of paper as me.
This is such a good chapter.
It's going to be a great chapter. Well, I'm going to write it. It's going to be written very much like Vowelnomics, if you're familiar with that book. It's going to be written like Seth Godin style, where it has like a ton of like very small, very, very short, punchy sections that are going to be like 600 words or so each, and really, really fast moving. So I've got like, there's something like 75 different sections now, because that makes it really, really easy for me to write. It's basically like a Q code system. I find it really daunting to sit down and say, I'm going to try to knock out a 3,000 word chapter. But if I sit down and I say, okay, I've got 300 to 600 words on this subject, and it's going to start with a story, and then it's going to have some sort of like the way that I always write is kind of in 5 steps, which is story. Step number 1, story. Step number 2, problem from the story. Step number 3, problem restated in a general sense. Step number 4, steps to solving. Step number 5, conclusion. Mm-hmm. And a conclusion is not a summary of the problem. A conclusion is either some sort of like new insight that you leave the person with, some sort of like really punchy statement, or some what's it called? Some like words to like simmer on, right? Like a conclusion that's just a summary of what you just said is kind of a cop-out. And in a book, you don't necessarily need a conclusion. In every section, sometimes you do. But yeah, so when you have that formula, it becomes very formulaic, right? And so as I'm taking notes, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for, I know what theme I want. I'm looking for all of the different branches on that theme. Then I'm looking at the stories that illustrate those branches. Then I'm pulling out the problem from the story, then the problem general. And then what are the actual steps to solving, or what do you need to know about that thing? What's the framework? And going out from there.
Man, I've learned a lot here today.
Yeah. I got a pee. Should we cut this short? What? No, this is good. Welcome to Seinfeld. Stop when you're ahead. We're only going to make this worse.
Fair. We done?
That's what I'm going to do.
All right.
Y'all have a great day.
Bye, y'all.
You have a great day, Jonathan Goodman.